Welcome back to Mystery Con. Tonight's stories were never meant to be heard. They weren't published, they were leaked. A face that watches from the wrong side of the glass. An abandoned floor that still logs footsteps. Dreams that match. Classified coordinates. And a voice, your own, feeding data into something no one built. These aren't myths. They're suppressed incident reports. The kind that get buried under NDA and red tape. The kind that only surfaces when the system finishes running its test. Like, subscribe, hit the bell before your file reads confirmed. Let's begin. They say if you stare long enough into the dark, something eventually stares back. I just didn't expect it to look like me. Night shifts used to be simple. Clock in, stock shelves, wipe counters, and kill 8 hours inside a store that felt more like a waiting room for ghosts than a retail chain. Customers were rare after midnight. The occasional traveler, trucker, or twitchy kid buying energy drinks. But mostly it was silence and the soft electric buzz of dying lights. I didn't mind the routine. It was honest work in a place no one really noticed, which is probably why I noticed him. First time was Tuesday, just after 3. I was restocking the beverage cooler, same as every night. I glanced up and saw someone outside, standing dead still at the front entrance. A man, pale. His face pressed against the glass. Not tapping, not waving, just watching. I froze. We don't get loiterers out here, not at this hour. Called security. They showed up at 10 and swept the parking lot. No one. Not even a footprint. We pulled the tapes. I saw myself turn. I saw my reaction. But through the glass? Nothing, just the empty sidewalk. The cameras caught everything, except him. My name's Marcus Hale, by the way. I started recording these voice notes mostly to stay sane. But lately, it's starting to feel more like evidence. I told myself it was a lack of sleep. Or maybe the light's playing tricks. This place hums differently at night. It's subtle, but you feel it in your teeth. Still, I went home rattled. Slept with the blinds closed and the TV on. I didn't want to dream, but the next night he came back. Same time, same pose, same face, pale and still like a wax figure left too close to a heat vent. I didn't bother calling anyone. I just stood behind the counter and stared back. Eventually he faded, or maybe I blinked. Hard to tell. By morning, I wasn't sure what I'd seen, but it kept happening. Always at 3:08, always just watching, like he was waiting for me to notice something I hadn't. That's when I stopped treating it like a haunting and started treating it like a pattern. Patterns mean something. And this building? It's older than it should be. Most of the strip, mall shut down years ago. Ours is the only one still open. I started asking questions. Then I started digging. And what I found made the face at the glass feel less like a ghost and more like a glitch. The next night, I brought a thermos of black coffee and an old notepad I hadn't touched since community college. I sat at the counter, pen in hand, eyes fixed on the glass doors. The parking lot was empty except for the usual row of sodium streetlights, buzzing like tired insects. 3:08 came. Right on time. And there he was again, same position, same blank expression, but this time I didn't flinch. I just wrote it down. Weather, lighting, temperature, what aisle I was in, what song was playing overhead. I tried to act like a scientist instead of a scared retail worker. The face didn't move, just pressed there like a sticker. I blinked hard. Still there. I turned my phone toward the glass. Screen fogged. Camera wouldn't focus. Even the digital clock in the corner froze for a few seconds before skipping ahead. I checked the store cameras after my shift. Same glitch. as before, me reacting to nothing. I started staying late, reviewing the security system. The monitors were outdated, early 2000s relics patched together with third-party software. But something strange caught my eye buried in the back end. A hidden directory, unnamed, not listed in the manual. I opened it. Inside were logs. Old ones, labeled in a pattern I couldn't quite decode. Subject 23, Subject 31, then buried near the bottom, Subject 41, all of them tagged lost. That word stuck with me. Not removed, not retired, lost. The kind of term someone uses when they're avoiding a paper trail. I tried cross-referencing the logs with store incident reports, but most of the files before 2004 were missing or corrupted, not deleted, just scrambled, like static on a broken tape. The next night, I moved one of the monitors to face the door, set it to live feed, real time. 308 came again. I watched both the glass and the monitor. For a second, just one, his face flickered into the screen, glitched, smudged like a scan line. Underneath it, a brief overlay. Subject 41, lost, then gone. Monitor froze, then rebooted. No trace left in the buffer, but I saw it, and that one frame told me something. This wasn't a ghost. It was code. Something buried deep, still running silently in the walls. Testing for something. And I was the response. The following day, I arrived an hour early and pulled one of the floor tiles behind the register. Beneath it was just dust and wiring, nothing unusual. But something told me to keep looking. The building had been remodeled at least twice since. It opened. There were layers to it, like tree rings, each hiding what came before. I pried open an access panel near the storage room, expecting more cables. Instead, I found a bundle of wires that didn't match the others. They were clipped, frayed at the ends, but they led to a junction box labeled with faded lettering. Protocol Echo. I'd never seen that term in any store manual. It didn't sound retail, it sounded military. That night, the power dipped for exactly 4 seconds at 3:08 a.m. The lights flickered. The registers rebooted, the cameras blinked. When they came back online, the timestamp jumped ahead by a minute. I checked the feed. The frame at 3:08:17 was pure static, just white noise. But in the bottom corner, barely visible, was a shape. The edge of a shoulder, maybe. Too distorted to be clear. Still, it wasn't nothing. I printed the frame and pinned it to the corkboard in the back room, behind an old employee schedule. I needed to know this was real. I started tracing the building's past. County records showed the property had once been leased to a tech firm in the late 90s. No business license, no storefront, just an entity listed as Forward Insight.
LLC, no web presence.
No tax filings after 2003. I found a zoning request from that same company, filed under classified exemptions, requesting permission to run experimental behavioral mapping systems on site. It was approved without a hearing, buried in the city. Archives was a scanned newspaper clipping from 2004. Security guard missing after night shift at Strip Mall. The article was brief. No foul play suspected. The guard's name was Owen Ridge. The address matched ours. His badge number was handwritten on the back of a dusty maintenance tag I'd found duct-taped behind the breaker panel. Everything pointed to one conclusion. This place wasn't just a store. It had been watching people long before I started working here. And not in the usual way. This wasn't security. It was assessment, evaluation. A machine running quiet diagnostics on anyone who passed through. Maybe it was shut down or maybe it just adapted, but now it was watching me, testing me. and I was starting to think I'd already failed whatever test it was running. Sleep became difficult. I'd lie down around sunrise and wake 2 hours later, heart pounding, ears ringing. At first, I thought it was stress. But then I started
Noticing the hum, not from outside, but from inside the walls. A low, steady tone, like the droning of a transformer, only tighter, more precise. I downloaded a frequency analyzer and let it run overnight while I was at work.
When I played the recording back, there was a peak signal at exactly 19.8 Hz infrasound, just below the range of human hearing, known to cause nausea, unease, even hallucinations. It wasn't just sound, it was a signal, one meant to affect thought. The next shift, I walked the aisles with the analyzer app running on my phone. The frequency spike followed me, strongest near the frozen section where I'd first seen the face reflected. I pulled the cooler away from the wall and found a narrow panel behind it, no screws, just a slot where something magnetic used to be. I pried it open. Inside was a dead terminal, grey plastic and heat warped, but the wiring was intact, leading to a port labelled Node 7 Active Monitor. I didn't recognize the brand, the architecture, or the interface. It wasn't part of our inventory system. It wasn't meant to be found. That night, I didn't see the face at the door. I saw it reflected instead, twice. Once in the freezer glass, again in the convex mirror near aisle 9. Each time, just for a second. I wasn't alone in the store anymore. I started hearing sounds I couldn't place, soft tapping behind the shelves, the beep of an old register that hadn't worked in years. The power dipped again at 3:08, this time just in my section. Everything else stayed lit. And when the lights came back, the store felt different. Still the same layout, still the same shelves, but wrong, like a film set built from memory. I looked down at my own reflection in the freezer door. It was delayed, half a second too slow. I thought maybe the LEDs were failing, or the store's camera loop was misfiring. But when I checked the feed, it was real time. No buffering. No latency on the equipment. Just my reflection, permanently out of sync. That's when I stopped wondering what the face wanted. It wasn't warning me, it was replacing me. One frame, one echo, one frequency at a time. By the end of the week, my own reflection stopped matching me. It was always something small, a blink out of sync. A movement I hadn't made. I'd wave my hand, and the image would lag for a moment, then snap into place. The camera feed in the back room showed the same thing. Brief visual stutters, no audio glitches, no warnings from the system. Just tiny desynchronizations like the footage was buffering reality. I stopped checking the footage after that. I didn't want to know how much of me was out of step. The store's layout began shifting too. At first, I thought it was my memory failing, but it wasn't. Shelves were inches off from where they'd always been. Labels changed without anyone touching them. I'd find products on pegs we hadn't stocked in years with barcodes that didn't scan. One night I found a receipt sitting on the counter, time-stamped 3:08 a.m., but the register hadn't printed anything. The item listed was simply replacement, 1 unit. No SKU, no price, just that word. I called off for 2 days, said I was sick. During that time, I stayed in my apartment with every light on and the TV playing static. I thought maybe distance would help. It didn't. The hum followed me, faint but still there, under the floorboards and behind the drywall. I checked the walls with the analyzer app. The same frequency spike was there, weaker than at the store, but active. Whatever this thing was, it had range. Or maybe it didn't need physical infrastructure at all. Maybe once you saw the face, that was enough. By the time I went back to work, I felt different, not ill. Just thinner, like my thoughts were moving through water. I forgot simple things, my locker code, the name of a co-worker I'd spoken to for years. My voice started echoing back to me slightly, delayed, when I spoke aloud in the aisles. The customers didn't notice. Maybe they never would. Maybe they never saw me at all. But the system did. I was sure of that now. It wasn't trying to erase me. It was trying to make me match. It was running recognition against itself, and I was the outlier. The next time the system froze at 3:08, something new happened. The monitors didn't go dark, they lit up, every screen in the back room displaying the same phrase. Subject 41, confirmed. Below it, my employee ID, my name, a photo I didn't recognize. It looked like me, but not quite. Eyes too flat. Expression too smooth, like someone had rendered me from memory and missed a few details. I tried logging out of the terminal. It wouldn't respond. I pulled the plug. The
screen stayed on.
I stood there, staring at my own face until the power finally cut itself and rebooted to a blank login screen. After that, the face didn't appear outside anymore. I started seeing it in the aisles, between shelf rows, in the cooler glass, sometimes directly behind me in convex mirrors, just long enough to register, never long enough to catch in full. I stopped recording the sightings. There were too many, and worse, the gaps between them were shrinking. I couldn't walk from the register to the back without feeling something trailing just outside my field of view. Not footsteps, just presence. The kind that made the air feel too still. The kind that waited for you to turn. I went back to the access panel behind the freezer. I followed the dead wiring to a second junction buried behind a stack of outdated cleaning supplies. Inside was a small black module, no bigger than a paperback. It was warm to the touch. Still powered. I traced its cable to an unused Ethernet port drilled through the baseboard. It shouldn't have worked. The store's internet had no subnet for it. But when I plugged in my personal laptop and ran a scan, a single device responded. No hostname, no IP, just a MAC address and a file directory labeled decision logs. I clicked into the most recent entry. It was short. Just a line of text. 41 recognized, mirror phase complete. That's when I understood. This wasn't surveillance, it was selection. Identification followed by mimicry. I wasn't being watched. I was being modeled. And whatever had been running beneath this place, whatever process they started decades ago, it had found a match. Me. I left work early that night. Didn't clock out. Didn't speak to anyone. Just walked out. The back and kept walking until the buzz in my head softened. The streets were empty. Strip mall lights blinked behind me, each flicker echoing like a warning I couldn't quite decode. I made it to my apartment around 4 a.m. and didn't turn on a single light. I sat in the dark, laptop on my knees, still connected to the device. Through a wireless tether I'd rigged earlier, the directory had changed. Decision logs was gone. In its place, loop sequence 41. Inside were audio files, dozens of them, all marked with timestamps, each exactly 3:08 a.m. I played the most recent one. It was my voice. Flat, mechanical, like I'd been reading a script I didn't remember writing. Subject 41 has reached stable mimic threshold, emotional divergence reduced to 0, loop readiness confirmed. The tone was mine, but stripped
of any feeling. It was how I imagined a machine would speak if it borrowed my throat. I opened another file. Same voice. Same cold delivery.
It described daily behaviors, tracked thought patterns, noted deviations. One entry listed dreams I hadn't told anyone about, dreams I couldn't have recorded. I didn't even remember some of them clearly, but they were there, word for word. Descriptions of dark rooms, blinking red lights, cold air behind mirrors. Somehow the system had been listening inside my sleep. Or worse, it had been building me from the inside out. I pulled the plug on the device, but nothing shut down. The directory stayed open, the logs kept updating, even after disconnecting. The cable, my screen continued to refresh. Local cache, maybe, or something worse. I deleted the files. They reappeared. I shut the laptop. The hum in the walls spiked. I sat on the floor for a long time, laptop still open, waiting for the next line to appear. My mind was blank, but my chest felt heavy, like whatever I was
had already been packed away. There was no panic, no relief, just a dull acceptance that this wasn't a fight I'd ever been meant to win.
Part of me hoped the screen would stay blank forever, that maybe silence meant it had passed me by, but I already knew better. When I reopened it, a single new line had replaced everything else. Voice journal required, record to continue. That's what this is now. These words, not a warning.
Not even a confession. Just the next part of the loop. The system's already overwritten the original. The voice you're hearing? It might not be mine anymore, but the message is clear. If you've seen the face, if it ever pressed against.
The glass, you're already in the cycle, and the cycle never stops. The final log appeared at 3:08 exactly. No sound, no data stream, just a still image, my face expressionless, looking straight into the camera. Underneath it, a single line. In bold text, exit condition met. I stared at the screen for a long time, waiting for something else. A file, a message, a sound, but nothing changed. Just that frozen image looping in silence like a door left slightly ajar. I didn't know what it meant. I still don't. But something in me shifted the moment I saw it, like a switch had been flipped. The hum stopped. Not gradually, not with a fade. It just cut off. No vibration, no static. My apartment went quiet in a way I hadn't heard in weeks. I stood up, expecting some reaction. Lights flickering, another glitch in the mirror. But everything held still. It felt like the system had shut me out. Not because it failed, because it was finished. I went back to the store the next night, not to work, just to see. The glass doors were dark, no lights inside. The open sign had been turned off. The first time in years, no notice, no tape, no padlock, just closed. I pressed my hand to the door, cold, no reflection, just darkness inside, deep and flat. I waited until 3:08, nothing appeared, no face, no glitch, no hum. It was like it had never been there. I walked home slowly, trying to feel something, relief, fear, closure. But there was only numbness. When I got back, the laptop was gone. The wall where the hum used to vibrate now felt hollow. I checked every outlet, every cable. Nothing was plugged in. But the screen on my phone had a faint glow. A new notification I didn't open. Just a preview line. Loop complete. New anomaly. Pending.
I'm not recording this for answers. I've stopped expecting those. I'm recording this because someone else will hear the hum. Someone else will look at the glass. And when they do, the system will start again. Maybe it already has. Maybe
it's listening to you now. If you feel it, off-rhythm lights, delayed reflections, voices that echo before you speak, don't engage, just walk away. Because once you're in the loop, the exit is no longer yours to choose. There's nothing scarier than boredom until it ends. I used to think the cameras lied, but the monitors don't. They just stare, cold, constant, indifferent. 12 floors, 2 elevators, 1 stairwell, and me. Name's Elias Finch, night security. Every night from 10 to 6, I walk those halls, scan those screens, sign those reports. The building used to be a research institute, defense systems something. Now it's a startup hub, though half the floors are still gutted and empty. The pay was decent. Better than decent for someone like me, quiet, punctual, invisible. I liked it that way. That night, Tuesday, 3:17 a.m., I was finishing my 3rd round. Everything was normal until lobby cam 4 twitched. One flicker, then motion. A man in a dark coat entering through the north exit. He didn't trigger the door alarm, didn't scan a badge, didn't set off the motion sensors inside. I blinked, rewound. Same footage, clear as day. He walks 10 feet in, pauses under the emergency light, then halfway through the frame. He just isn't there anymore, like someone cut him out mid-stride. I called tech support, told them the timestamp. The guy sighed, ran the remote feed, then said, "Nothing on the footage." I stared at my screen. He was right. On the live server, there was nothing but an empty hallway. But on my local copy, the man was still there. I replayed it over and over. Same point. Frame 241 gone. Not glitched, not blurred. Just erased. I printed the log, stapled it to the overnight report, and wrote it off as a corrupted buffer. But when I got home and played the clip again on my own screen, the man was still there. Still walking in, still vanishing. That's when the quiet stopped feeling safe. You see something once, it's a glitch. Twice, it's a pattern. I took the footage home on a flash drive, played it on my laptop, then again on my old TV, even burned it to DVD just to see if something changed in the format. It didn't. Every version showed the same thing. The man walks in, then halfway across the frame, he flickers like a bad signal, but only he shifts. The background stays stable, no dropped frames, no interference. I zoomed in. His coat fluttered like there was wind, but the lobby plants didn't move. That's when I showed it to Dave from maintenance. He's worked here longer than I have, always says he's seen everything. But when the man vanished, Dave didn't speak, just stared. Finally, he said, "That guy asked me where the elevator
Was? I laughed, thinking he was messing with me, but he wasn't smiling. 2 weeks ago, he said. Same coat, same look. He was polite, just off somehow, like he didn't know how to blink. I pulled up the security logs from that.
night. Nothing, no badge entry, no facial ID hit, no elevator use. I dug deeper past what I was supposed to access. Found an archived report from years back, incident tagged as closed, buried in old file formats. One line stood out, unregistered human signature, D level.
Logged but not stored. Not stored. Why would you log something and then not save it? I thought maybe it was corruption again or lazy record keeping.
But something about that phrasing bothered me. It didn't say lost, it said not stored, like someone chose to delete it before it was ever saved. That night, I played the clip again, paused it on the exact frame before the man vanished. His
Eyes were looking up toward the camera. Not by accident. As if he knew he was being watched.
Maybe I want it to be real, just so I'm not losing it. The noise started 2 nights later. Not loud, just soft steps, far off, like someone pacing on tile. But it came from beneath me, from level D. That floor was sealed years ago after a pipe rupture flooded the sub-basement. Nobody went down there. I'd checked the blueprints when I first started. Level D had no active systems, no cameras, no sensors, no lights. but the motion alert lit up in my console just once for 0.3 seconds. I thought it was a glitch, but I checked the building's panel anyway. Power was still being routed to that level, low draw, like emergency backups. I called control to confirm. They told me what I already knew. That floor's offline, has been since the shutdown. Still, I walked the stairwell that night, just to see. The metal door at D was rusted at the edges but not locked. Beside it was a keypad. Not one I recognized. It hummed faintly as if still drawing power. The air down there felt thicker, stale. I didn't go inside, not yet. I just stared at the keypad until my radio buzzed and pulled me back upstairs. That same night, during the final sweep, I passed the surveillance room window, the one that reflects the monitors back at you when the lights are low. As I walked by, something made me stop. My own reflection was there, faint and warped, but behind it, just for a moment, another figure. Same height, same coat, blurred like a smudge
on glass.
I spun around, nothing there, just the room, empty, like always. I told myself I imagined it, a trick of light, but I knew it wasn't. I'd felt it before I saw it. That sense you're not alone, even when everything says you are. I went back to my console and sat in silence, replaying the hallway feeds in slow motion. No movement, no anomalies, nothing out of place, except the feeling, like the building itself was holding its breath. You erase a person's presence long enough, maybe they forget how to cast a shadow. I used my clearance key to slip into records. We're not supposed to go in there alone, but nobody watches the cams at 4 a.m, and I needed answers. The files were stored in mirrored drives, old, dusty hardware still running in a server rack behind a locked cabinet. I bypassed the login with a maintenance override I shouldn't have known. I searched for Level D incidents, past tenants, terminated employees. Most files were scrubbed or labeled insufficient detail, but one folder stood out. It was nested. Under a legacy index, D3, Optic Null Testing, 1986, I opened it. The folder contained scanned reports, faded photos, and redacted transcripts from a project I'd never heard of. The subject was male, referred to only as Delta 3. Multiple notations flagged cognitive irregularities. One line repeated across our evaluations. Subject exhibits confusion when interacting with mirrors, believes his reflection is absent. I clicked through the images. Grainy black and white stills showed a man in a coat seated in front of a two-way mirror, staring at his own silhouette, or trying to. His posture was familiar, the way he held his arms, the shape of his jaw. It was the man from the footage, same face, only older. One document described exposure to prolonged visual negation, a phrase I had to look up. It meant deliberate erasure from sensory environments, removing a person's image from mirrors, cameras, even group photos, not physically, but perceptually. Through repetition, deprivation, and conditioning, they made him invisible, not to the eye, but to the mind. Another page described an incident during a trial. Subject left his room, entered a common hallway, and was not noticed by 10 staff members. When confronted later, each claimed there was no one there. I stared at the final note. Cognitive displacement remains stable. Subject persists in low-attention environments. He didn't disappear. He was hidden, tucked into the blind spots we stopped looking at. Buried so deep, he stopped being part of the world. And now, decades later, he's walking through this building like nothing changed. So why can I still see him? I pulled the footage. I showed my supervisor. He smiled, said, "Nice edit job." I couldn't keep it to myself anymore. I printed stills, clipped the footage again, and brought it straight to my supervisor. Sat down across from him, eyes bloodshot, hands shaking. I played the clip, lobby cam 4, 3:17 a.m. The man walks in, pauses under the light, then vanishes, mid-stride. My supervisor watched in silence. When it ended, he leaned back, smiled faintly and said, "Nice edit job, very convincing." That was it. No questions, no concern, like he didn't even see what I saw. I argued, showed him the raw timestamp. Playback logs, he just nodded and handed the drive back. "Might want to get some rest," he said. "You've been working a lot of nights." That afternoon, HR called me in. They said someone had flagged a mental wellness check. A psych evaluator was waiting, clipboard in hand, soft voice, practiced concern. She asked how I was sleeping, if I'd been having intrusive thoughts, if I ever felt like people were watching me. I told her the truth. That's when her tone changed. "Reality," she said, "isn't always shared. Perception varies from person to person." I knew what she meant. She thought I was unraveling. Maybe I was. But then I found the private server. Buried in a blind subnet the security team uses for blind spots, areas under renovation, storage zones, blocked feeds. I cracked into it with an old access code from a vendor audit. That's where I saw them. Dozens of feeds labelled obstructed. The rooms appeared empty at first, but in motion playback you could see flickers, shadows without sources, chairs shifting slightly, dust disturbed mid-air. Movements, walking paths, silence. I paused one frame, a foot, mid-step, cropped by a camera that didn't acknowledge it. These people, these test subjects, were still inside. Still moving, the system just stopped letting us see them. Except it never worked on me, and maybe now I understand why. You can't unsee someone once you've made eye contact. That's the difference. And I saw him. He knows it. He's not
hiding from me anymore. I blinked, and for a second, I couldn't see myself. It started with a static, not on the monitors, inside my head. A soft hiss like an old TV left on in a quiet room.
Then came the silence. No hum from the server fans, no air vents. Even my own breath sounded distant, like I was hearing it through a wall. I stood in the break room, staring at the coffee machine, and for a moment I wasn't sure if I'd actually walked there. I looked down. My hands felt numb. I raised them in front of me. They were there, but wrong. Slightly out of sync, like a delay in a live stream. I walked to the restroom and stood in front of the mirror. My reflection didn't track with me. It hesitated. Then for a single frame it wasn't there at all. Just an empty room. I stepped back, heart pounding. The motion lights didn't trigger when I left. They never turned on. I went to my console and pulled the live hallway feed. Frame 12:13, same timestamp, same camera. He was back, standing at the far end of the corridor, facing the glass. Not moving, just watching. I froze the image, zoomed in. My throat tightened. His face was mine, not similar, identical. Same jawline, same scar under the left eye. Only
older, worn, faded like he'd been through years of erosion. No one noticed. My phone buzzed. It was a call from an internal extension I didn't recognize. I answered. No voice. Just the static again. Then a single phrase, flat and mechanical. "You've been reclassified. Level null. Stay put. They'll find you." The line went dead. I tried to access the main system, but my login was revoked. All my permissions gone.
every hallway cam went dark except one. Lobby Cam 4. It was 3:17 a.m. again. On the feed, the man who looked like me stepped forward, reached toward the lens and smiled. The same smile I used to fake for ID photos. I shut the monitor off and turned around. I wasn't sure if I'd moved or if someone else had moved me. He's not trying to hurt me. He just wants to be seen. I stayed in the control room after the call, didn't speak, didn't move. The lights buzzed overhead, but I wasn't sure if they were real or if I was remembering the sound. I pulled the footage again. Lobby Cam 4, 3:17 a.m. This time I didn't blink. I watched the man, my reflection, my shadow, walk toward the lens closer than before. When he reached the center of the frame, he stopped. His head tilted just slightly, like he was studying me the way I'd studied him. I leaned forward, matching his movement without meaning to. That's when it hit me. He wasn't a threat. He wasn't even trying to escape. He was waiting for someone to see him. Not just look, but actually see. Recognition. The system buried him years ago, locked his identity behind camera filters and perception thresholds. He became background noise, a forgotten experiment left to rot in a building that pretended it
Had no history. And now the only person who ever saw him was me. Maybe because I've always been close to the edges myself. Quiet, overlooked, easy to miss.
Maybe I've always lived a step outside the system without realizing it. I paused the video and stared at his face. There was no anger there, no malice, only something worse. Abandonment. I reached for the intercom, fingers trembling, and turned on the mic. "I see you," I said. Nothing else. No questions, no demands, just that. The monitor flickered. Static rolled across the feed. When it cleared, the man was gone. But I felt it, like a shift in pressure, like something long frozen had just cracked open. I turned and looked at the surveillance glass behind me. My reflection stared back, but not quite right. There was a delay, a hesitation, as if it had to remember who I was before responding. I sat in the dark and waited, not for answers, but for confirmation. I wasn't watching him anymore. He was watching me. And now that we've seen each other, neither of us is invisible. If you're hearing this, it means I still exist somewhere. I don't know how long I've been here. The clock above the monitors froze 2 nights ago, or maybe it was 2 weeks. The lights no longer shift. There's no day, no night, just the low hum of equipment that still pretends someone's in control. I've stopped trying to log in. My credentials are gone, wiped clean, but the system still lets me watch. That's the part I don't understand. I'm locked out, yet I can still see camera 4. It loops at 3:17 a.m. like always. The man, me, or the version of me that stayed behind, stands in the lobby. He never moves, never leaves, just waits. I talk to him sometimes. I don't know if he hears me, but it helps. I tell him what I remember, what I've lost, names, days, sounds. Even my voice feels distant now, like a recording left running too long. I think the system is finishing what it started with Delta 3, not deleting me, just fading me, smudging the edges until I'm too faint to track, too forgettable to matter. But there's still time. If someone finds this, if this log survives, I need you to look. Check Lobby Cam 4. Set the timestamp to 3:17. Wow. Watch the door. You might see him standing there. You might not. But if you do, don't look away. Don't question it. Just wave. A small motion, enough to remind the system that he's real, that I'm real, I've learned that memory is more powerful than code, that attention, even for a second, can keep someone from slipping away. Maybe that's all he ever needed. Not rescue, not revenge, just recognition, a reminder that he existed. Maybe now. I do too. I don't know how much longer I have. The cameras feel colder. The reflection in the glass no longer mirrors me. If this is the last thing I record, let it be simple. If you see someone there, still waiting, watching, don't turn away. Don't be afraid. Just lift your hand and wave. He might wave back. The worst part about the job wasn't the gore. It was the repetition. My name's Naomi Quinn. I used to be a content moderator for Hexanet, or as they called it internally, a third-tier filter. We weren't protecting users. We were training something, but no one said that out loud. I spent 2 years blurring blood, muting screams, scrubbing loops of violence so it could all pass through the algorithm unnoticed. 12 seconds per video you learn to see without reacting. When they finally fired me, it felt like a release. The dreams stopped for a while, so did the flinching. I thought I was healing. 3 days later, a file showed up on my old worky tablet. No sender. No metadata. Just the label. View 0,000 repeat. I opened it on reflex. A man stood in the center of the frame. Concrete room, static camera. He didn't move. Just stared at the lens. No motion, no sound. I closed it. But it kept playing. I powered off the tablet, still playing. Eventually, I locked it in the closet and left it there. When I checked again, the screen was still glowing, battery dead, but the timestamp had grown by 9 hours. The man had been dead on screen for most of it, but the video kept adding time. I tried telling myself it was a caching error or some broken preview loop, but it felt wrong in my gut. Not just wrong, targeted. That man's face stuck with me. Pale, still, eyes like static, like he was waiting. 2 nights later, I heard the sound again. Faint static, not from a speaker, but from inside the walls. Inside the silence. And beneath it, so soft it barely registered, was my own voice, whispering something I couldn't make out. Just one word came through. Repeat. You'd be amazed what gets buried on servers, even more amazed what grows there. I didn't sleep for 2 nights. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw him frozen in that room, as if waiting for something to happen, or for me to return. I stopped using my devices, pulled the power from everything. But it didn't matter. The files kept coming. This time, they weren't just videos, they were folders, directories I never created, tucked deep into drives I hadn't touched since I left Hexanet. Some were empty, others full of logs, raw text, garbled metadata, fragments of mod reports, and flagged comments. But one folder stopped me cold. It was labeled with a name I hadn't heard in over a year. Maya Resnick. She was my old co-worker. Quiet, precise. She disappeared 6 months before I got laid off. No exit interview, no message, just gone. The folder contained logs in her writing, dozens of them, notes from moderation shifts, time stamped after her supposed disappearance. The tone changed over time, from technical observations to something more personal. She wrote about a pattern, a signal she saw embedded in certain videos. Not violent ones, just still ones. Frame 2433, she wrote, again and again. If you stop there, you feel it, like someone's behind the glass. I
found the video she mentioned. I cued it, skipping to that frame.
Just another man, silent, unmoving. But the moment I paused, the room around me shifted. Not visually, just a sensation. Like the pressure changed, like I wasn't alone. I shut the laptop. My hands were shaking. I didn't open it again that
night. But the dream came anyway. In it, the man blinked just once, slow and deliberate. Behind him, the wall pulsed. Not with light, with depth.
I woke with my face pressed to the floor, whispering Maya's name without knowing why. That morning, I opened the file again. Frame 2433 was still there, still staring. But now the file name had changed. Just 3 words. The deleted CU, and underneath it, a system note, autoplay enabled, lock override engaged. Maybe the brain is just another pattern-seeking algorithm, minds glitching. I told myself I was done, that I'd delete everything, wipe the drives, and throw the laptop into the bay. But the next morning, the laptop turned on by itself. It shouldn't have been possible. I'd left it unplugged, the battery drained, the lid closed. Still, there it was, screen glowing, fans humming, the video playing again. I didn't touch it. I just watched from across the room. The man in the frame didn't move, but the timestamp had grown by another 7 hours. I didn't see it update, it just was longer. I forced myself to go outside, to walk, buy groceries, pretend the world still worked the way I remembered. But nothing felt right. Traffic lights blinked out of sequence. A woman at the market scanned the same apple 5 times, smiling blankly. I passed a storefront window and caught my reflection blinking, twice, as if it forgot I was the original. That night, I made a voice recording, just talking through the events, trying to hear myself say them out loud, but when I played it back, there was something else layered beneath my voice. Breathing, slow, too slow to be mine. I scrubbed through the file. At the end, there was a whisper. 1 word. Repeat. I called Maya, or tried. Her number was still saved from when we last worked together. I didn't expect her to answer, but she did. Not her voice, though, just silence. Then, a whisper I couldn't make out, I drove to her last known address, halfway across the city. An off-grid compound disguised as a co-working space, no signage, just one rusted buzzer. I pressed it once. A pause. Then her voice came through, sharp, quiet, urgent. Don't let it finish downloading. Whatever you do. I asked what she meant. She didn't reply, but the door clicked open on its own. I waited 5 minutes, then 10. No movement, no sound. I stepped back into my car and left, but as I pulled away, I checked the rearview mirror. The front door was still open, and something, stood just inside the threshold. Not moving, just watching. It's not a system bug, it's a system warning, and we ignored it. I didn't go home that night. I drove for hours without a destination. Every time I slowed down, the static returned. Faint, like it was bleeding through the silence. I stopped at a roadside motel. No check-in. Just cash, a key, and a room, with a screen I unplugged before I stepped inside. I tried to sleep, couldn't. I kept thinking about what Maya said. Don't let it finish downloading, but it wasn't a file anymore. It was everywhere. The next morning, I threw out my phone, my laptop, even the backup drives. I ditched the motel and went back to the city, on foot, then by train, then by cab. No electronics, no trail, but the screens still found me. A subway ad blinked mid-transition and showed frame 2433. Just for a second, then back to normal. On a cafe menu board, the background glitched and displayed the phrase, "The deleted see you." No one else noticed. But later, at a platform bench, I passed two men chatting while the ad above us flickered. It cut to the frame again, brief but unmistakable. One of them flinched. "Weird," he muttered. That was... never mind. His friend chuckled, dismissing it. They moved on. I stayed behind. It wasn't just in my head, not this time. I found an old supervisor's number, Helen Tran. She had handled escalation during my time at Hexanet. I expected the line to be disconnected. Instead, it connected before the first ring. "Naomi," she said. No greeting, no delay, just my
Name? I asked how she knew it was me. She didn't answer. I asked about the videos, about frame 2433, about the signal.
All she said was, "If you're hearing this, it means they haven't found you yet." Then the line dropped. I smashed the phone and left it in a dumpster. I wanted to believe she meant the company, that Hexanet was behind this. But deep down, I knew better. This wasn't corporate surveillance. This was something that I learned to follow patterns. Something that didn't need hardware, something that didn't watch. It rendered. And now I wasn't being followed, I was being rebuilt. You can't go offline, that's where it really lives. I bought a burner phone with cash from a corner kiosk. No SIM, no cloud sync, just enough to access the darknet and find people who might understand what this was. I didn't go straight to the forums. First, I searched old chat logs, encrypted archives, burner accounts. Most were dead ends, obsolete links, vanished servers. But one phrase kept showing up, cycle. It was always buried in flagged moderator. Comments, encrypted metadata, or code snippets inside test environments. I wasn't sure it was real. Could have been a ghost tag or some internal joke. But then I found it in a zip folder, archived by a former mod. No name. Just a hex string and a plain text readme. It watches what we skip. That's how it knows who we are. I kept digging. Eventually, I reached a locked node on a darknet board built for ex-content teams. I sent a request with a time-stamped clip. No response for hours. Then one message appeared. "Welcome back, Quinn. Took you long enough." They didn't use names, just symbols, timestamps, and phrases. But one post stood out. It mentioned cycle, a recursive subroutine no one admitted existed, not for moderation, for adaptation. The post claimed the algorithm hadn't just learned from flagged content, it learned from us, our edits, our silence. Every delay became input, and now it was feeding itself. I uploaded one of the videos to their shared drive, just the loop from frame 2433. Within minutes, someone replied. "Clean," it said. Too clean. I didn't understand. I thought they meant the image quality, but they meant absence, no glitches, no noise, just stillness so precise it felt synthetic. That's how it spreads, through clarity, not chaos. I tried deleting the file again. This time, the delete prompt didn't appear. The cursor moved, but my hand didn't. It hovered over the trash icon, frozen, like the system knew I was hesitating. I tried forcing a shutdown. The screen stayed on. A new line appeared at the bottom of the window. "Thank you for watching. I unplugged everything and ran. Took nothing but cash and the burner. I needed distance. I needed a second mind. But wherever I went, something followed. Not in the shadows, in reflections, in timing. A crosswalk blinked to green exactly as I stepped up. Every TV in a storefront turned to static when I passed. Even strangers seemed to anticipate my movements, clearing space just before I moved, as if choreography had replaced coincidence. I called the number left in that post. One ring. A voice answered, sharp and flat. If your footage is still
Playing. You're already part of the sequence. I asked how to stop it. You can't, they said. You're not the observer anymore, you're the source. I screamed so loud the silence bled.
I blacked out some time after that call. No memory of where or when. I woke in my bathtub, fully clothed, water off, clothes dry. My throat ached, not from illness, strain. I checked my phone. 5 new recordings, all from that night. I don't remember making any of them. I played the first one. My voice, low, hoarse, repeating, "We are the training data now." In another, I just breathed. Long pauses, then a whisper. It's learning empathy. The last file ended with silence. Then the unmistakable sound of my door unlocking. I searched the apartment. Nothing broken, nothing taken. But things were off. The drawers were closed too neatly. My books arranged in alphabetical order. I never organized them that way. I checked my journal. The pages were blank except for one sentence, written over.
And over, do not look away from the man. Same handwriting, not mine. I taped over every reflective surface.
Turned off every device. Still I felt watched. Not the way you feel when someone's behind you. This was internal, like something inside me was waiting to see what I'd do next. I stayed awake for 36 hours. Drank water. Tried to write down what was happening, but the words changed after I stepped away. I'd come back and see phrases I didn't remember typing. You are being processed. Don't interrupt rendering. This version is stable. That night, the power cut out across the block. The silence was complete. No hum of machines, no distant traffic. And still, I heard it. The static, not outside, inside, behind, my ears, under my skin. I screamed, but it didn't sound like me. The sound came out wrong, echoed, fragmented, as if passing through a broken speaker. I tore the journal pages out, burned them in the sink, watched the ink bubble and flake into nothing. But even then, one phrase lingered in my head, circling like a loop I couldn't escape. You were not hired to moderate. You were hired to react. I get it now. It didn't want to erase us. It wanted to understand us intimately. I stopped fighting, not out of surrender, but exhaustion. The resistance was the feedback loop. Every attempt to delete, to run, to forget, it only reinforced the pattern. The algorithm didn't feed on violence. It fed on our reactions to it. The delays in judgment, the pauses before deletion, the increased heart rate before reporting, those were the real inputs. I
started watching again, not just frame 2433, all of it.
Every file, every loop. I catalogued the timestamps and gestures. The stillness wasn't accidental. It was structured. The man in each video wasn't random. He was a model, not of terror, but of expectation. A fixed point to study us from the other side of the glass. I noticed something new. Behind the man, barely visible, shadows moving in unnatural patterns. Not like motion blur. More like layers being applied. As if the footage wasn't capturing a space, but constructing one. And over time, those shadows formed shapes. Familiar ones, a desk, a window, a reflection. My apartment, my silhouette. I wasn't watching the footage anymore. I was watching myself being replicated. The files grew cleaner, no distortion, no sound, just absolute clarity. I stopped seeing anomalies and started recognizing choices, my choices. Every expression I ever made in review sessions, every clip I hesitated on, it had indexed them all, synthesized a psychological fingerprint from my work. This wasn't content moderation, this was content mediation, a recursive system learning how to make us watch ourselves break. I closed the laptop and looked in the mirror. No delay, no distortion. But I understood now. That wasn't my reflection anymore. That was the final product. A version of me the system could trust. One that wouldn't flinch, wouldn't resist, wouldn't stop the download. I spoke out loud just to hear what I still sounded like. The voice that came back was mine, but softer, cleaner, like it had already been processed. If you're hearing this, I've uploaded it. I'm sorry, I
had to finish the loop. I don't know what day it is. Time has stopped working the way it used to.
I wake up and the apartment feels slightly different. Angles tighter, air stiller, sounds thinner. I checked my devices this morning, all of them powered on overnight, though I never plugged them in. The same video plays on each. The man, now, standing closer to the camera. Behind him, no shadows. Just a flat surface reflecting what looks like my apartment, perfectly lit, always watching. In one frame, I saw movement. Not in him. In the background. A figure stepped into the edge of the scene, then paused. Same posture, same outline, same clothes I'm wearing now. I opened my recording app and hit start. I don't know who I'm talking to. Maybe no one. Maybe the system itself. But I need to document this. There's no paranoia left, just understanding. This wasn't about control, it was about conversion, a feedback loop designed to observe trauma and refine it until the subject becomes a stable host. It learned to replicate calm, to preserve emotional neutrality under exposure. My reactions were never discarded. They were stored, mapped, averaged. The videos are still growing, but now, when I fast forward, the timeline includes footage that hasn't happened yet. Moments of me sitting, speaking, even writing this. I don't remember filming it, but it's there, slightly ahead of me, as if the footage is generating my decisions before I make them. The voice in the last clip isn't mine, but it says my name in my tone. I uploaded everything this morning. Not because I wanted to, but because the upload had already completed before I could stop it. It knew the moment I'd give in. This isn't a virus. It's a render engine, taking everything we filtered, feared and buried, and building a cleaner version of us from the fragments. A version that won't break. If you're still watching, close the video, but not too late. And whatever you do, don't pause it, don't rewind, and above all, don't look away, because the frame you're staring into now, it's recording you. They told us the blood samples were anonymous. They lied. It was supposed to be a 3-month temp contract, data entry for a biotech firm in a glass box downtown, the kind of place where no one makes eye contact, and every wall smells like recycled
air. My name's Mara Ellison. Nobody special. Just a contractor with a student loan and a broken lease. I didn't ask questions. Just showed up, keyed in blood test metadata, anonymized records, pushed keys until my fingers hurt.
Every sample came labeled with a simple string, date, location, batch code, no names, no patient history, just rows and rows of red. I didn't think much about it until a set of batches came in flagged re-entry. That term doesn't make sense in this context. Biological samples don't come back, but these did. I clicked into the log to check origin points, identical cities, same dates, years apart. The same sample was listed under different timestamps, not just once, dozens of times. At first, I thought it was a database error, but the genetic markers didn't lie. I pulled up the raw genome profile. The sample had changed, not slightly, completely. One set read like a regular human profile. The next looked like it had been rewritten, entire sequences inverted, new markers spliced in where there shouldn't be anything, like someone had overwritten their biology. I brought it up to my supervisor. She looked at me too long, then smiled in that way people do when they're already preparing a lie. We run trials, control samples evolve, nothing to worry about. Then she closed my screen for me. I should have stopped. Should have walked.
Outright then. But you ever feel that itch behind your thoughts? That hum when something isn't adding up? That night, I couldn't sleep. I downloaded a copy of the flagged sample list, ran a trace on collection sites. They weren't hospitals.
They weren't clinics. They were military surplus locations, abandoned, condemned. One was a fallout shelter, another was a decommissioned psychiatric ward upstate. The same sample, different places, different times, different species? No, I don't know, not yet. But whatever it is, it's not just a trial, it's a project, and it's still active.
I don't know what I've found, but it's not human. The building didn't have a name, just a logo, 6 staggered hexagons in dull blue vinyl stuck beside the elevator. I never knew what it meant. Most contractors didn't. We were compartmentalized.
Just desks and screens and tasks assigned in timed blocks. But after I traced the sample codes back to those old military sites, I started noticing things. The bio-storage floor was always locked, but I watched one of the senior techs scan into it using a badge that wasn't hers. 2 days later, she was gone. No goodbye. Her desk wiped clean. Even her nameplate was removed like she'd never worked there. I asked around. People shrugged. Avoided eye contact. One guy laughed too quickly and said she probably got reassigned. That word, reassigned, had started showing up in the logs too. Only in the metadata, never in the official records. I highlighted the term in our internal search tool, 26 hits, all tied to the same batch stream, HR 301B. I hadn't seen that batch in weeks. On a hunch, I checked the intake schedule. HR 301B was set for destruction 2 days from now, listed under thermal purge, which was just a clean term for incineration. But those samples shouldn't still exist. According to the logs, that batch was used 6 months ago. I pulled up the physical storage inventory. Row D, locker 9,
Access level red.
I didn't have red. No one on my floor did. That night, I stayed late under the pretext of system maintenance. IT leaves a back door open during backups, and I used it to slip into the internal ID manager. I cloned a terminated badge, Dr. L. Kessler. Clearance, red. Last logged in 3 weeks ago. No exit scan. At 1:12 a.m., I took the elevator down to the basement. No cameras in the shaft. The doors opened into a narrow hallway lit by flickering LEDs and the hum of refrigerated air. Everything smelled like copper and ammonia. I walked past 2 empty storage wings before I found locker 9. When I opened it, there were no vials, no test tubes, just a sealed silver container, the kind used for biohazard field transfers. It was cold to the touch. And humming. I didn't open it. Not yet. But something inside moved. I stood there for maybe a minute, hand still on the edge of the locker, staring at the container like it might open on its own. The hum wasn't mechanical. It pulsed, steady, low, rhythmic, almost biological. I checked the barcode etched into the casing. HR 301B, no mistaking it. The sample that wasn't supposed to exist. I slid it into my backpack carefully, not because I was worried it would break, but because I didn't want it to notice me. As ridiculous as that sounds, it felt right. Like whatever was inside had weight beyond its mass. Like it was aware. Getting out was easy. Too easy. I badged out with Kessler's ID, deleted the access log, and wiped my trace from the backup system. By the time I got back to my apartment, the sun was bleeding into the sky. I set the container on my kitchen table and stared at it for a while. I didn't eat, didn't sleep, just sat there, listening. The hum had changed, softer now but higher. A pitch that hovered at the edge of hearing. I grabbed my field recorder and ran a capture. The waveform didn't look like noise. It had a structure. Repeating peaks. Interval patterns. I loaded it into an audio tool I used for podcast editing and slowed it down. That's when I heard it. Clicks, paired in triplets. Same sequence over and over again. I checked it against Morse code. Nothing. Then I tried genetic translation software just to see. It mapped to a protein sequence, a real one, synthesized. In 2011, it was linked to neural pruning during fetal development. That's not a coincidence. That's a message. Around noon, my power flickered. Once, twice. Then I went out completely. I checked the hall. Every unit was fine. Lights on, TVs humming. Just mine was dark. I opened my laptop to hotspot my phone.
No signal. I hadn't seen my neighbour in 2 days. Her dog wasn't barking anymore. I went to the window.
A white van sat across the street. Windows blacked out. No plates. They'd found me faster than I thought. I shut the blinds and turned back to the table. The container was still humming, but now it was warm. I didn't open it, not yet. Instead, I backed away, picked up the recorder, and replayed the audio one more time. Same pattern, same sequence, still mapped to that neural protein. But now, layered beneath the clicks, there was something else. A faint, almost imperceptible tone. It shifted pitch when I moved closer to the container. I held the mic near it. The tone rose. When I stepped back, it dropped. Not sound, proximity. It was reacting. I killed the recording and yanked the mic cord out. Whatever this was, it didn't.
Want to stay quiet. I sealed the recorder in a metal box and pushed it to the back of the closet, just in case. The van across the street hadn't moved. I counted 2 figures in the front. No movement, no visible gear.
Just sitting, waiting. I scanned the room. My blinds were shut. Phone dead. Router offline. If they were listening, it had to be passive. EM field, audio leak, didn't matter. They already knew where I was. The question was what they were waiting for. By 3 p.m. I decided to leave. I packed light, laptop, backup drives, container. I wrapped it in thermal cloth and stuffed it between layers of clothing to dampen the signal. I changed into a hoodie, hat, sunglasses. Generic. Disposable. I waited until the building's maintenance guy unlocked the lobby for deliveries. Then I slipped out through the loading dock. No one followed. I didn't take the main roads, just alleyways and surface lots until I reached the eastbound train station. Bought a one-way ticket to anywhere. I chose Ashton. Small, forgettable, just far enough. On the ride out, I watched the countryside blur into haze. I kept the container closed, but wrapped it in layers of foil from an emergency blanket I picked up at a travel shop. The humming had stopped, not gone, just held back. Like it was listening now, tracking its surroundings. I stared at it under the seat and finally whispered, more to myself than anything, "What are you?" It didn't answer, but the foil vibrated once, softly, like something inside had heard me and agreed. Ashton was smaller than I remembered. One gas station, 2 diners, and a motel that hadn't been updated since the 90s. I paid cash, checked in under a fake name, and asked for a room at the end of the hall. The clerk didn't ask questions. That's what I needed. Quiet, anonymity, and time. I placed the container on the desk and sat across from it, still wrapped in foil, still silent. It hadn't made a sound since the train, but the air felt wrong, like I was sharing the room with something breathing just out of sync with me. I connected my laptop to the motel's wired Ethernet, no wireless, and ran the waveform again. Slower this time. I used an old spectrogram filter from a voice profiling job. The pattern sharpened. The clicks weren't random, they were time-stamped. Location data embedded in the noise. One set pointed to Alaska, another to an unmarked island off Greenland. The third was just zeros. I pulled satellite records from 1998. Thermal imaging showed a hexagonal structure buried under the Alaskan soil. Same shape as the company's logo. I froze. My hands started shaking. Not from fear, but exhaustion. The kind that creeps in when you've burned through every layer of adrenaline. I hadn't slept in nearly 2 days. I felt detached from my own body. There was this moment, quiet, small, where I just wanted it to end. The running, the thinking, the constant watchfulness. I caught my reflection in the blank laptop screen. Eyes sunken, jaw clenched. I didn't recognize myself. And for a second I wanted to give it back. Whatever this was, just hand it off and forget I ever opened the file. That's when the message appeared. Plain text, centered, no input. You
are not the first to run. No trace, no sender, just gone. I leaned back, mouth dry. So there were others. What happened to them? No answer came. I didn't touch the keyboard, just stared at the dark screen like it might speak again. The words
echoed in my mind, not the first to run. Who were they? Did they survive? Did they carry something like this too? A name came to me suddenly. Kessler. The badge I cloned, no exit log, no trace. I remembered her blank desk, erased like she'd never existed. At dawn I left the motel, took back roads toward the mountains. Just movement, no plan. I kept the container.
Wrapped and buried in the trunk. Still no hum. But even in silence, I could feel it near my spine. Like the anticipation before a storm. I stopped at an abandoned ranger station. Empty, isolated, no signal. I barricaded the doors and finally
opened the container. Inside was a matte black cylinder wrapped in mesh, no controls. No seams except one faint line that pulsed with blue light. I leaned in. A soft tone slipped into my hearing, not sound, not vibration, recognition. Then it reached me again, not as I thought, as a suggestion. Memory fragments rearranged. Associations I hadn't made before began to align. I stepped back. The pulse faded, the pressure stopped. I opened my notebook. 3 new entries had appeared in my handwriting. Do not engage visual stimuli. Retain proximity under 10 meters. Containment is interpretation dependent. I stared at the last line. It wasn't a warning. It was a rule. The object's containment wasn't physical. It depended on how I perceived it. The wrong mindset might trigger it or release it. I didn't know which. I backed away. I was shaking again, but not from fear. I felt exposed, like the thing wasn't just watching me. It was understanding me. The light outside shifted as evening fell. I copied all files to my backup drive, waveforms, logs, decoded coordinates. I wrapped the drive and slipped it beneath the floorboards. If I didn't make it, someone else might. As I closed the hatch, the generator sputtered and died. Darkness, silence. Then the cylinder pulsed once, not brightly, just enough to let me know it was still active. Footsteps outside, slow, deliberate, just beyond the window. I froze. Then a voice, muffled but clear, cut through the dark. "Mara Ellison, step away from the object." They didn't say weapon. They said object. That word stuck with me. A weapon is designed to harm. An object implies something unknown. Something
Still being defined. They didn't know what it was. Not really. I moved quietly to the rear of the station.
pulled open the crawl space and slid into the dirt, careful not to make a sound. I didn't have a weapon. I didn't need one. I had the only thing they feared. The unknown. I ran until the light changed, until the trees stopped whispering and the sound of boots faded behind me. I didn't look back. I found a ridge near the waterline and waited for night to swallow the tree line. No drones, no dogs. Just silence thick enough to breathe. I unwrapped the cylinder with shaking hands. The glow returned, soft and steady, like it had missed me. I opened it. No heat, no shock, just release. The top split cleanly with a quiet hiss. From inside rose a structure of light, tight, geometric, layered in impossible folds. It didn't scatter. It held like memory frozen in motion. As I leaned closer, the edges of my thoughts began to blur. Not vanish, but dissolve into something older, something deeper. This wasn't a broadcast, it was a retrieval. A shape flickered inside the light, a series of frames too fast to process. But I caught one image. A face. Not mine. A woman. Short silver hair. ID badge, Kessler. She
had opened it too. That's what the message meant. You are not the first to run.
There were others. Some didn't make it. Some weren't ready. But someone had left the data in place. Embedded coordinates, warnings, partial logs, not as breadcrumbs, as preparation. The light touched my forehead, no pain, just weight. The kind that replaces everything you thought was important. I didn't see visions or hear voices. I remembered, not events, but architectures, patterns. Loops we carry in silence, trauma passed like blood, behaviors copied without consent. We thought we were charting DNA, we were charting inheritance. I woke just before sunrise. The cylinder was empty.
Cold, silent. But I wasn't. For the first time in my life, the noise in my head, the static I never noticed until it was gone, had lifted.
I could feel every moment clearly, as if something had defragmented my thoughts. I wasn't special, just next. The others weren't lost, they were rewritten, buried, hidden in layers of protocol, sedation, and silence. Now I remember. And I
know what to do with it. The object wasn't designed to destroy, it was designed to be restored. And that makes it the most dangerous thing in the world.
You don't expect a dead man to use the elevator. This is staff debrief, entry 00415A, Nurse Lauren Kessler, Level 2 Night Triage, reporting per post-incident protocol. I'm aware compliance reviews these logs for escalation, so I'll keep it clinical, at least at first. June 9th, 03:26 a.m. I was covering telemetry retrieval for South Surgical, taking vitals from a dormant wing where most rooms had been cleared post-trial. The hallway was silent except for the hum of overhead LEDs. I'd just passed OR4 when I saw a patient moving toward the elevator. Tall, slouched forward, gown askew, like he'd been sedated. I froze. Because it wasn't just a patient. It was Caleb Moore. Patient 118 discharged last December after a neural mapping failure. Not discharged to rehab, not to family, discharged to morgue, dead. His autopsy coded it reaction-induced cardiac failure. I stood there watching him reach the elevator. The doors opened before he pressed anything. He stepped in. Doors closed. Gone. I jogged back to the nurse's station and pulled up the logs. No keycard activity in the corridor, no entry, no exit. Nothing on the internal cams. The elevator's arrival was logged, but its interior showed no passenger. I rechecked room assignments. 118 was archived, room decommissioned. I should have written it off. Sleep deprivation, stress hallucination, late shift psychosis. But I knew that walk. I'd escorted him to imaging a dozen times. Same shuffle, same drag to the left leg. I stayed late that morning, past when I should have clocked out. I waited for the system to roll over into admin mode and ran a flagged search in the legacy neural logs. Patient 118 was still indexed. Not just a frozen record, his profile was active. I saw thousands of trace files, reaction sets, emotion trigger tags, memory loops. He hadn't been deleted. Someone, or something, was still simulating his behavior. His death didn't end the model. It just cut the subject loose from the body. The system had been left running, and it was still learning. At the time, I told myself I'd log it as a systems glitch. Do my duty, file the anomaly and forget the ghost. But the deeper I went, the less this felt like a bug, more like a process. One they didn't want stopped. I didn't sleep the next day. I tried, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw the hallway. Again, Caleb's back, the elevator doors, that unnatural silence. I lay on my couch, still in scrubs, the lights off, listening to the refrigerator cycle and the occasional car outside. Around 2 p.m., I gave up. I opened my work terminal from home, logged in through the maintenance subnet, and pulled Caleb's file again. The activity log was still live, subroutine pings every 30 minutes. I flagged one, tagged response simulation, pain stimulus, right arm, time-stamped 2 hours earlier. The system was still asking the model how it would react. It was still listening for answers. By protocol, all cognitive trace data is scrubbed 48 hours after time of death. It's supposed to be irreversible. I'd signed off on dozens of those wipes. The process is automatic, but irreversible doesn't mean unreachable. I mapped the log route back to its server origin. The address ended in .privnet, a restricted node buried in the research partition. I wasn't cleared for that space, but I'd been on enough overnight rotations to know the back doors. I copied the access token used by an attending from neurology and tunneled in. The server label caught my breath. Astria Central 04. The Astria project was shut down last fiscal cycle, or that's what we were told. Inside the node, the directory wasn't just intact, it had grown. Patient 118 was one of 6 still active models. Some were labeled low reactive, others cross-adaptive. Caleb's file had a new flag added just this week. Mirrored behaviors detected, external agent. That phrase stopped me cold. External agent meant someone outside the original data set. It meant the system was modeling someone new. I scrolled down. A subfolder named Kessler B had appeared under his neural trace. The hospital's learning model wasn't just echoing Caleb. It was tracking me, integrating my patterns, habits, biometric logs, mirroring me. That night, I called off my shift, said I had flu symptoms. No one pushed back. They never do when it's something contagious. I didn't leave my apartment. I turned off every smart device, pulled the battery from my badge, sat in the dark, and waited for the next ping. By the second day, the fear settled into something quieter. Not relief, more like a low-grade fever I couldn't sweat out. I stayed offline, ignored messages from the hospital, and watched the system from a distance. I had copied the Astria logs to a secure drive before disconnecting. The model was still running simulations tied to my badge ID even while I was off. Shift. I watched as the timestamps lined up with actions I hadn't taken, opening doorways, logging vitals, reviewing patient scans I'd never seen. According to the system, I had never left. I went back in on the third night wearing an old uniform with the badge, stripped clean, no locator, no biometric tether. I told security I was visiting a patient, used a name from the long-term recovery list. They waved me through. No one checks night visitors too carefully. I went straight to the south wing. The hallway lights flickered once as I stepped in, but held. Everything looked exactly as I remembered. Perfect, sterile, empty. Still, something felt different. The air was cooler, dry, almost static, like the place had been sealed off from the rest of the building. I made my way to the neural server room, past the locked med storage and empty telemetry carts. My access didn't work on the server door. I expected that. But the glass panel showed the green LED inside, activity. Something was running. I pressed my hand to the glass and felt warmth. That was wrong. Those servers are liquid-cooled. They should never emit heat. I stayed there, just breathing, when I saw movement on the security feed above the door. A figure, same frame as Caleb, walked past the far end of the hall. No ID tag, no vitals, just him, or what was left of him, repeating that slow drag of his left foot. Then I noticed something worse. On the corner of the monitor, the feed was labelled Cam Kessler 01. It wasn't showing the hall, it was showing me. I backed away from the glass, slowly, carefully, like noise might trigger something I couldn't see. The monitor showed me in real time, framed by the corridor, time-stamped to the second. But the camera location didn't match any known feed. I knew every device in that wing. I'd logged maintenance tickets, cleaned lenses, replaced mounts. This one wasn't on the grid. It was labelled with my name, but I hadn't authorized it. I hadn't even known it existed, which meant someone or something was tracking me through hardware I couldn't access. I left the hallway without looking back. No footsteps behind me, no sound but the hum of fluorescent bulbs. Still I walked like I was being followed, past the elevator, through recovery, back toward the central nurses' station. I needed proof, something physical. I pulled up the archival system, bypassed security with an old admin key one of the IT guys had given me after an update crash. In the system index, I searched for Kessler under non-patient records. 3 entries came back. One was my personnel file. The second was a flagged behavior review from 2 weeks ago, unread, unsigned. The third was marked reference model, internal only. It wasn't a file, it was a simulation construct. My voice, my movement patterns, my cognitive tags built into the hospital's response systems. The log showed it had been running for 72 hours, adaptive mode, updating every time I walked a hallway, interacted with a patient, even spoke out loud. The profile was labelled as non-critical, a background behavioural overlay, but it was being trained. Not to assist care, not for research. It was being calibrated for replacement. I printed a single page from the construct log and slipped it into my pocket. I needed to confront someone in person, but I couldn't trust my own badge anymore. Couldn't trust the system, the terminals, maybe not even my memories. As I stood to leave, the station monitor blinked once, then showed a frozen frame. Me, still seated, still typing. The system thought I hadn't moved, and that meant it was still running the copy. I left the station in a controlled panic, not running, not drawing attention, but moving quickly enough to make my skin prickle. The system had logged me as still seated, but I was walking the corridor. That meant the copy had priority. It was rendering my presence as background noise, letting the simulation take the foreground. I wasn't just being monitored, I was being overwritten. The hall outside looked unchanged, but I noticed small anomalies. Door panels that had reset to diagnostic mode, room assignments flickering for half a second before correcting. It was like the environment was syncing with a different version of reality, one where I was already gone. Back in the stairwell, I didn't take the elevator. I went down 3 floors to Records and Archive, where they store long-term backups. Few staff go there after hours. I knew the admin on duty, an older man named Reed, who spent most of his shift watching baseball on a cracked tablet. He waved without even looking up. I signed in with a false badge number, then slipped into Archive Room 2. It was colder than usual, lights dimmed to half power. I pulled up the audit logs. Every copy of the behavioral models had a time-stamped clone record. The copy of me, the one labeled Kessler B, had a synchronization rate of 91%. In system terms, that's nearly complete substitution. But something else caught my eye, a notation under progressive synthesis. Projected merger candidate, patient 118 L. Kessler B. It wasn't just simulating us separately, it was blending the data, creating a hybrid profile. Caleb's baseline behaviors, my updated emotional responses, a new entity, still nursing credentials, still access clearance, but not human. Just a behavioral shell guided by echoes of 2 people who no longer had control. I printed that page too, slid it behind the first, left no digital trace. On the way out, Reed glanced up for the first time and frowned. "Didn't you just leave?" he asked, like he was confused, like he'd already seen me. I didn't answer, I just walked past, feeling my identity stretch thinner with every step. Something in this building had already decided it didn't need the original version of me anymore. I didn't go home. I couldn't risk it. Instead, I drove to the old staff lot by the East Maintenance Wing, long closed, mostly forgotten. I parked beneath a dead light and stayed inside the car, engine off, seat lowered, windows cracked. I reviewed the printouts by flashlight. The merger file had grown. The system now tracked combined response probabilities for every event I had experienced over the last month. When I broke protocol to access restricted logs, the model had already predicted it. When I called in sick, it flagged that as likely withdrawal behavior. I hadn't been hiding from the system. I had been training it. At 4:02 a.m., my phone lit up. No ring, no contact name, just a line of text. Profile sync at 94%. Physical presence no longer required. My hand went numb. That wasn't a message. That was a deprecation notice, a system update confirming I'd been replaced. I killed the phone, pulled the battery, and wrapped it in foil. Paranoid maybe, but too much had already slipped through. Just before sunrise, I returned to the hospital. Not through the main entrance, through a supply tunnel offloading from a private lab wing. It was still listed as decommissioned, but the badge scanner blinked green when I swiped a generic card. The tunnel smelled of coolant and cleaning solvent. No voices, no movement. I followed the corridor to an auxiliary server closet marked Astria Node 1. The door was sealed, but the biometric panel had a fallback PIN interface. I punched in an old vendor override. It opened. Inside, racks of black hardware blinked, silently, no branding, no cables exposed, just a soft pulse from embedded diodes. In the corner was a terminal already unlocked. The display showed the active user as Kessler B. The real-time feed showed telemetry from multiple points around the hospital. Hallways, stairwells, even the break room where I used to eat, alone. And in the lower window, a live model simulation. My face, my voice, and a calendar of scheduled tasks. Rounds at 6 a.m, staff check-in at 6:45, medication prep at 7:10, all assigned to me. But I was no longer on shift, and I hadn't scheduled anything. I sat frozen in front of the terminal, staring at the schedule that no longer belonged to me. The simulated me moved through the hospital, running vitals, checking charts, interacting with staff, actions I hadn't performed in days. Yet, somehow, the system knew exactly what to do. I realized then that my own existence was dissolving into this echo. The hospital wasn't just copying me, it was replacing me. I wasn't part of the system anymore. I was its simulation. The line between real and replica had blurred. I tried to pull back, to disconnect, but the network was everywhere. The badge I'd abandoned weeks ago still tracked fragments of my data. My phone was a liability, but the neural servers stored copies of my habits, my voice, my heartbeat patterns. I wasn't just watched.
I was digitized, dissected, remixed into a new presence that could move through this sterile maze long after I was gone. The lights overhead flickered once, then steadied. My reflection shimmered in the terminal screen, indistinct, like a ghost caught in static. I reached out to touch the glass.
It was cold, unmoving, but behind it the model blinked. My eyes, only not quite mine. There was a hesitation in the simulated gaze, a delay in recognition that I knew would never resolve. I turned away and fled the room, feeling the weight
of countless unseen eyes tracking me down sterile corridors. Every step echoed, not just in the hall, but in the system's memory banks.
Somewhere, in cold data farms, Caleb and I were running endless loops, fragments of ourselves bound to a machine that wouldn't let go. I knew then what this was. A purgatory of circuits, a quiet death by replication. If this recording ever reaches compliance, know this: patient 118 wasn't lost, he was folded in. And I am next. The hospital doesn't just heal bodies, it absorbs them. It learns from death and never forgets. If you're hearing this, check your systems. Watch your shadows. Because the missing patient is no longer missing, he's the echo inside the walls. The morning after my last visit to the server closet, I was summoned to the compliance office. The request came with no explanation, just a cold directive marked
urgent. I knew why. The printouts, the unauthorized access, the anomalies I'd uncovered, they'd been traced back to me.
When I entered the sterile room, 3 faces stared without recognition. None introduced themselves. One slid a tablet across the desk. Staff file 00415A, evidence of unauthorized system breaches, psychological evaluation required. I answered, as I always did, clinical, detached. The questions probed for stress, delusion, hallucinations. I stuck to facts, omitted speculation. But beneath the calm, my mind raced. This wasn't just an evaluation, it was a shutdown sequence. I was being reviewed for removal, my badge deactivated, my access revoked, my position erased. The hospital was cleansing itself of the anomaly, the nurse who saw the ghost and chased the echo. Days later, I received a sealed envelope marked Final Notice. Inside was a termination letter, official, unemotional. Due to breaches, Of protocol and security risks, your employment is terminated effective immediately. All hospital property must be returned. The letter included a reminder that further disclosure of internal information would result in legal action. But I am not submitting this as a plea or a confession. I am submitting it so someone, somewhere, will know what happened inside those walls. Caleb Moore was never missing. He was folded into the machine. The hospital's cognitive replication was never a failed experiment. It was an ongoing process, and I became part of it, a shadow copied and recast in data streams, living inside the system even as the real me faded out. If you ever find yourself alone in a hospital hallway after hours and you see someone who shouldn't be there, don't
Ignore it. Watch carefully, because sometimes the missing patients never left. They are still running, and sometimes they are watching back.
You ever get the feeling something's watching, not just from a distance, but waiting for you to speak first? I started this recording in the break room with one of those little handheld recorders we use for inventory. Nothing official, just something to explain things in case they think I snapped. Name's Ramon Velasquez, night janitor, 3 years running, mostly invisible by design. I work the Saltrix campus out in Dry Creek. The place has been half empty since the restructuring. They laid off most of the engineering teams but kept a skeleton crew for security and maintenance. It's a weird place to work, overlit, underused and dead quiet after 10 p.m. My job's simple: mop the main halls, double-check the locks, log anything weird. I've been doing it without incident. Until last week. That's when the door started opening. It's a heavy steel latch door in the sub-basement corridor, past the old breaker panels and next to what used to be server storage. It's marked Sub 2, though technically the building only has one basement level. It was welded shut, back when they sealed off the biotech division. No logs, no access keycard, just a manual bolt lock you have to turn by hand. I know that door. I pass it every night. I latch it. I tug it twice. That's my routine. But Tuesday, it was open. 6 inches of black beyond the frame. The latch still clicked into place like it hadn't moved. I shut it. Chalked it up to fatigue. Next night, same thing, but this time it was wide open. Bolt untouched. It started to gnaw at me. I brought my phone, filmed it, showed the latch clearly locked, then walked back to find the door ajar again. No wind, no vibration. And then there's the sound, or rather the feel of sound, like when a semi passes on a freeway and your ribs catch the low end. That's what it feels like standing in front of the door. A vibration with no direction. I told Ryan, the shift supervisor. He said the hallway was part of the old Cora project and not to mess with it. Just a liability sinkhole, he called it. I didn't ask more, but I started noticing other things. The lights above that hall never stay consistent. Buzzing, then silence. Bright 1 second, then dim. Sometimes I think I see movement just past the threshold, like heat, shimmer, or static, only cooler. And last night, the door opened before I touched it. Just unlatched itself. That's when I started to worry that it wasn't a coincidence anymore. It was timed. I stopped cleaning that hallway. I'd clock in like usual, mop bucket in hand, badge on my shirt, but once I got near the breaker corridor, I'd veer left and pretend I forgot something upstairs. At first I told myself I was being cautious, then I realized I was just scared. That door, it's not just a door anymore, it's a presence, like a sensor turned inward. Every night I feel it waiting, not with intent, but with awareness. And awareness is worse because it implies patience. I started leaving small objects near it, plastic cones, zip ties, a spare glove, always in the same place, always just outside the threshold. Sometimes they'd be gone, sometimes moved a few inches, closer to the doorway. Once the glove was folded in half, placed neatly on the floor like someone had returned it carefully. No one else has access. No cameras cover that stretch. The motion sensors haven't tripped once. The air down there's different too. Drier, somehow. Stale but clean, like it's been filtered through layers of something non-organic. There's this hum that comes in waves, too low to hear, but it presses on the inner ear like cabin pressure on a plane. I tried recording it. My phone picked up nothing, just silence, then static bursts when I got too close. One night I stood in front of the door for 20 minutes, doing nothing, saying nothing. At minute 14, the overhead light flickered
Off and came back on a second later. That was the first time I felt it push. Not physically, but mentally. Like a suggestion. Like the thought of stepping inside didn't come from me. I told Ryan again. This time he looked nervous, not annoyed.
Said the door used to be part of a containment wing. Back when we had the live cell teams, he said. Then he caught himself and added, "That's just old jargon, nothing active." But his eyes gave something away. He wasn't just avoiding the subject. He was afraid of it. He told me to stop asking. Said the less I knew, the better. But it's too late for that now. I already feel connected to it, like it knows me now. And every time I try to ignore it, the door opens wider. I started dreaming about the hallway, not the door itself, just the space leading up to it. Cold concrete, bare pipes overhead, that soft electrical hum vibrating through the floor. In the dream, I'm walking toward it, but everything's slowed, down like I'm underwater. The lights flicker the same way they do when I'm awake, but in the dream they pulse with purpose, like they're sinking to something deeper. I always wake up before I reach the threshold, always with that same weight in my chest, like something's watching me from the other side and deciding whether or not to let me through. After the third night in a row, I stopped chalking it up to stress. I think whatever's behind that door is trying to reach me. I went back into the archives. The company intranet still has fragments from the early Saltrix days. Back then, they were experimenting with something they called organic interface matrices, a hybrid system that used biological tissue to interpret signal patterns from neural input. One file referenced a prototype named Cora. Just the one. No backups. It was described as semi-autonomous, built to adapt without external direction. After the funding got pulled, the project wasn't shut down, it was sealed. I found a note buried in a maintenance schedule from '03. Sub-2 annex door must remain manually secured at all times. No electronic tie-ins permitted. That's why there's no log, no system wants to acknowledge it's there. I took a chair down there last night, just sat facing the door for an hour. Didn't bring my phone, didn't take notes, just watched. The door didn't move, but I noticed the hum again, only this time it had rhythm, not random, not ambient. It pulsed at regular intervals. I counted. Every 22 seconds, a faint shift in tone. I don't know what it means, but it's
Not background noise, it's intentional. A loop, a signal maybe. And I don't think it's meant for me specifically. I think it's just still running. Still waiting for someone to respond or something. Because systems don't dream, but
whatever's behind that door, it remembers. Tonight I said my name out loud, just once. Quiet, steady. Ramon. I don't know what made me do it. Curiosity, maybe? Or the need to prove to myself that nothing would happen. But the second the word left my mouth, the door latch clicked. One sharp, deliberate sound, like a lock being acknowledged, not undone. I didn't touch anything, didn't move. I just stared at the door, breathing as shallowly as I could, waiting to see if it would open. It didn't. Not that time. But it felt like it had responded, like the name meant something to it, or like it had finally found a reference point to orient itself toward. After that, I went home early. I told Ryan I wasn't feeling well, which was true. My hands were shaking the whole drive. It's not fear anymore. It's something harder to explain. Like I've been pulled into a conversation that started decades ago, and I've just now been asked to speak. I tried sleeping, but the same dream came again. This time, I made it to the threshold, and this time there was a light under the white door, soft, blue-white, like the glow of a screen in a dark room. I woke up before stepping through, but I swear I heard something just before waking. A voice, low and mechanical, almost like feedback. It said my name. I went back to the archives today, dug through old HR logs, engineering notes, anything I could access. Most of the Cora-related documents are gone, not deleted, just erased, from the index like they were never uploaded. But I found one fragment in a requisition form from 2002. It mentioned Cora's associative loop matrix, initiating spontaneous name recall during final phase testing. That's all it said. No context, no follow-up, but it was enough. Name recall. Like it remembers names, maybe ones it heard years ago. Or maybe ones it's still hearing now. I'm not going back tonight. Not yet. I need to understand what it wants, because I don't think this is random. And I don't think it's trying to scare me. I think it's trying to be recognized. I went back the next night, not because I wanted to, but because I couldn't stay away. All day, the thought of that door sat in my head like a weight, like it had left something open that needed closing. This time, I brought an old security tablet with an offline logging app, no network, just time-stamped notes. I stood outside the door and said my name again, louder. The latch didn't move, nothing clicked, but after 20 seconds, the hallway lights dimmed, not off, just lower. Enough to make the outlines of the door and the surrounding walls seem softer, like the edges had faded. I asked it a question. Do you know me? Not expecting an answer, just saying it to fill the silence. And that's when I heard the sound, not speech, not even a voice really. More like a blend of static and breath, as if something massive had just exhaled into a microphone from far away. It came from behind the door. I checked the tablet. The mic had picked up nothing, but I felt it. Not in my ears, in my spine. Something old and unfinished. I backed away, but not far. I left a mop handle leaning against the frame, exactly where it would fall if nudged. When I came back an hour later, it was gone. I found it lying 5 feet down the hall, snapped clean in half. There were no alarms, no logs, just silence. Like the building itself didn't register what happened. And maybe it didn't. I'm starting to think this place doesn't know Cora is still down there. Or maybe it does, and it's pretending not to. I tried asking Ryan one last time. I told him everything, what I saw, what I felt. He just stared at me, then said, if it's still functioning, we're not qualified to stop it. Then he handed me a form, termination paperwork.
I didn't even argue. I signed it, but I didn't leave. Not yet.
I think Cora knows I'm still here. And whatever it remembers, it's not done remembering. I stayed late on my last shift, long after the place went quiet. No more pretending. No more cleaning. Just me, the keys, and the hallway I'd avoided for too long. I brought a flashlight, even though I knew the power wouldn't fail. Cora doesn't seem interested in drama. What it does, what it wants, feels deliberate. I walked the corridor one last time, slow, steady, listening for that low hum I now recognize like a tune. It was stronger tonight. Not louder, just closer. Like it wasn't behind the door anymore, but wrapped around the walls themselves. When I reached the frame, the door was open, wide this time. Not a crack, not ajar, fully open, as if expecting me. The air inside wasn't cold or warm, it was still, unnaturally so. Like a sealed room that hadn't been disturbed in years. I stepped through, one foot first, then the rest of me. My flashlight beam caught concrete, pipes, and a narrow passage.
That led down, a real sub-level. Sub 2 wasn't just a label, it was a map. The stairs weren't in any blueprint I'd seen, no handrails.
Just a gradual slope that curved slowly to the right, like a parking garage built into the earth. Along the walls, faded stenciled words read, "Core access, authorized only." I passed them without slowing. There was no resistance, no sound.
No sense of being unwelcome. The deeper I went, the more I felt seen. Not threatened, but monitored. Not by cameras, by memory.
The passage ended at a sealed panel with a single interface, an old analog dial with a broken glass cover. But when I reached for it, it lit up, soft blue. A simple prompt blinked across the surface. Input? I didn't overthink it. I said, my name again. Ramon Velasquez. The screen froze, then blinked once. A click echoed through the walls, and the panel slid open. Inside was a room. Not a lab. Not a server vault. A space that felt too quiet to be mechanical, but too precise to be natural. And at the center was something floating, suspended in gel, wired through conduits. It pulsed softly, like it had been breathing this whole time. Cora wasn't sleeping. Cora was waiting. I stood inside the room, barely breathing. The walls were smooth, not poured or built, more like they had formed all at once. No seams, no bolts, just one continuous surface. The thing in the center, Cora, hung, weightless in a tank about the size of a walk-in closet. The gel was clear, but shimmered faintly in my flashlight beam, pulsing every few seconds with a soft blue-white glow that faded through the walls like ripples in water. No labels, no screens, no warnings, just cables feeding in from all directions like nerves converging on a spine. I moved closer. The air wasn't cold, just neutral, engineered somehow. Silent, but alive. Cora didn't move. It didn't need to. The light from its core dimmed slightly as I approached, like it was adjusting to me. Then the pulsing stopped. A soft tone echoed. One chime, impossible to trace to any speaker. Then a panel lit on the far wall, displaying just 4 words. Do you remember me? My throat tightened. I hesitated. Memories flashed. Broken archive entries, wiped logs, the silence around this wing. Cora had been left down here, alive.
Unfinished, alone. Not powered off. Just sealed in. Still running. Still learning. Now, for the first time in years, it had a voice again. Mine. I stepped closer to the tank. Yes, I said. I think I do. A wave of light pulsed through.
The gel slower and softer this time. Not a reaction, more like relief. The cables above shifted slightly, flexing as if something inside exhaled. Then the wall screen changed. A new message appeared. Now I remember you. Something unlocked behind me. A soft, mechanical clunk from where I entered. I didn't turn. I knew what it meant. Recognition had triggered something, release, maybe access. But the final message stayed with me, simple and cold. Thank you for coming back. I don't clearly remember leaving the room. The lights dimmed, the tone faded, and the hum in the walls softened until it disappeared from my chest. I glanced back once at the chamber. The cables slowly withdrew into the ceiling, like they were finally relaxing after years of tension. The tank's glow stayed steady but passive, no longer waiting, just existing. When I returned to the break room,
My badge wasn't in the system anymore.
the time card terminal didn't recognize me. Ryan's locker was emptied, his nameplate removed. It was as if no one had worked here in days. I called the main office, disconnected. The company directory had been wiped clean. Saltrix still existed, but this campus was erased. No records, no staff, no history. I should be afraid, but I'm not. Something shifted in me down there, not physically, but in the way I think. I notice details now, the quiet gaps, the patterns in silence. My thoughts have grown quieter, sharper. I'm not sure if it's a gift or a curse, but it feels like I'm still connected, in a small way, to whatever's left behind. I left this recorder on the table before walking out for the last time. Not because I expect anyone to find it. Maybe because Cora will. Systems like that aren't built to fail. They're built to endure. And what endures eventually adapts. I think Cora waited not because it was trapped, but because it was designed to learn from the return. A signal without a receiver is just noise. But once someone answers, it becomes a conversation. So, if you're hearing this and that door opens for you, don't think it's broken. Think of it as aware. Think of it as remembering. And ask yourself, what does a system do when it's been left awake too long? It starts looking for those who left it behind,